I work at a haunted oil field in Montana, and the rules are insanely dark. I never should have opened that door. I swear, if I had known what lay behind it, I'd have turned around. Days blur together at the oil field. It's just the same routine: waking up before dawn, coffee that tastes more like dirt than beans, and the endless hum of machinery. But this wasn't part of the plan. The morning felt abnormal, heavy. A heavy fog curled around us like a sinister hand, squeezing tight. The shadows stretched, whispering secrets. The air was thick with something: fear. Uncertainty. A chill crept into my bones, making every step to the pump jack feel like a walk through a graveyard. But I ignored it. I pushed it down, deep inside. That's what we do in this line of work: pretend we're not afraid. As the sun climbed, it barely cut through the mist. I could hear whispers, almost like voices carried on the wind. Words I couldn't make out. They felt too close, too personal. Then I heard it. A clattering noise. My heart skipped. I stood frozen, sweat trickling down my back. The tools hung on the wall, trembling as if they'd just had a conversation with something unseen. I shook my head, convincing myself it was just the noise of the field settling. Or maybe a critter stirred from its slumber. But then, there it was again. A soft scrape behind me. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. Shadows danced at the corners of my vision. I felt eyes on me, piercing and cold. Each breath hung in the air, thick like smoke. I could taste the fear in my mouth, the metallic tang of something sinister. Get a grip, I whispered to myself, but I wasn't alone. The air crackled, and electricity tickled my skin. Then all at once, the silence broke. A loud bang echoed far too close, and I jumped, my heart racing like a startled deer. I crept deeper into the building. The half-light barely illuminated my way. What was I looking for? Answers? Or maybe just a way to prove to myself I wasn't losing it. Another noisy, a distinct sigh, as if the walls themselves were tired. Then I saw it. A figure, just a shadow against the dim light. My blood froze. It lurked at the end of the hall, shifting unnaturally. I couldn't even tell if it had a face, it melted into the darkness. My breath hitched, and all I could think was, run. But I didn't. I stood. Stuck between fear and fascination, my instincts screamed at me to flee, yet my feet were glued to the floor. Then the figure moved closer. I felt a scream clawing at my throat. Just as I opened my mouth to let it out, the lights flickered and went out. Absolute darkness swallowed me whole. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The darkness wrapped around me like a heavy cloak, suffocating and inescapable. I submitted to the stillness, my heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. The figure, if that's what it was, had disappeared into the void. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it lingered just beyond the reach of my vision, watching, waiting. That a shuffle came from the left, moving through the shadows with an eerie grace. I gripped the wall, my nails scraping against the rough wood, trying to ground myself in the fear. Silence reigned, even the machines seemed to hush in reverence to whatever haunted this place. My breath fell into a measured rhythm, but every exhale felt like an offering to an unseen presence. Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered back to life, casting a sickly glow across the corridor. I blinked against the harsh light, momentarily blinded. When my vision cleared, the figure was no longer at the end of the hall. It had moved closer, now positioned directly in front of me, close enough that should it have a face I would have recognized its features. Except, it didn't. A shroud of inky darkness obscured any details. A low growl gutted the air, vibrating through the walls, sending tremors through my bones. Instinct kicked in, surging through me like adrenaline, and I turned to run. I stumbled down the corridor, the noise of my own footsteps echoing like a funeral march. The growl morphed into a sound low, guttural whispers clawing at the edges of my sanity. Just as I reached the exit, something snatched at my jacket, yanking me back. I spun around, the dim light illuminating nothing but the empty hull. My heart thrashed in my chest, and I grit my teeth, urging myself to move forward. I burst through the door into the flickering daylight only to stop dead in my tracks. They stood outside, a line of figures cloaked in shadows, their forms indistinct but unmistakably menacing. No faces, just empty hoods gazing at me with the weight of abyssal voids. A cold sweat broke out over my skin as I realized they weren't just watching, they were waiting, as if drawn by the scent of fear mingling in the air. "Help," I choked out, but my voice was swallowed by the wind. No one ever heard my desperate plea. The figures drifted forward, I felt their coldness seeping into the ground beneath my feet, pulling me closer. My pulse quickened, the urge to escape robbed me of breath, but nowhere felt safe now. In that moment of paralyzing terror, the whispers emerged again but louder, overlapping and chaotic. I could finally decipher fragments, words of warning, stories of despair, echoes of previous laborers who vanished without a trace. "You shouldn't have come," they cried in a chorus stale with decay. "Leave while you still can." That I turned back, wanting desperately to flee into the heart of the oil field, but the figures loomed behind me, a malice coiling in their depths. Suddenly, the ground beneath me lurched, as if the earth was rebelling against my presence. A crack opened at my feet, sharp and gaping, showcasing a darkness far deeper than the night that I in a moment of weakness, I fell backward, tumbling toward the void, the sinister wail of the figures drowning out my scream. And just before I was swallowed whole, I caught a glimpse of something unusual at the bottom of the chasm, a glimmering flash of metal. Something that looked an awful lot like a watch. It was my father's. Then the earth roared, pulling me deeper into the ever-hungry dark, and all at once, it was silent. The silence enveloped me completely, thick and suffocating like a shroud. I was suspended in darkness, dazed and disoriented, the cold crevices of the chasm swallowing all sense of direction. There was nothing but an oppressive weight pressing against my chest, a fear so acute it felt like a living entity. I could almost taste the earth's rot, mingling with the remnants of my father's watch, which glimmered somewhere below in the abyss. "Help!" I yelled, my voice a mere whisper swallowed by the enveloping dark. As I steadied my breath, desperate for semblance of control, I realized the whispers had returned, swirling around me like smoke, saturating every crevice of my mind. "You will join us," they murmured, the voice resonating from all directions, each syllable a gust that rattled my very core. A flicker of movement caught my eye from below. The watch continued to glint with a taunting brightness. With every instinct screaming to retreat, I focused hard on that pulse of metal, a remnant of my past, of lives lost and secrets buried deep within the walls of this land. As I grasped the edges of the crack to pull myself back to the surface, the earth trembled anew, as if angry that I dared to challenge its grasp. The ground quaked beneath me, a violent shudder spreading outward. In that moment, a burst of pale luminescence illuminated the shadows, revealing the figures now standing at the edge of the chasm, their forms coalescing in an almost ritualistic formation. They moved as one, inching closer as if drawn by a magnetic force, with their hooded heads tilting in unison. A sudden rush of wind whipped my hair back, bringing with it the stench of decay, burning oil, and something far more insidious, grief. The air thickened with nostalgia wrapped in despair, and I could almost see flashes of lives lived in this forsaken oil field, each flickering memory swiftly extinguished, locked away in silence. Then, the shadows transformed, they twisted and contorted, the bodies stretching, elongating into monstrous shapes almost too horrific to describe. I flinched back from the edge, and for the first time, daring to glance away. I remembered tales of creatures that fed on fear, of entities birthed from humanity's pain, lurking in places where the sun rarely shone. The growling grew into a swell of hisses that threatened to pierce my eardrums. "We are the lost, the forsaken. You think you'll escape?" The voices morphed into a single, guttural tone that rattled through my bones. I looked back at the chasm, and the watch shimmered again, urging me inward. My father's face swam to the forefront of my thoughts, his laughter, his warnings. "Don't dabble in shadows, you'll become one." That I tore my gaze from the depths, my heart racing as I flung myself away, scrambling to regain my footing. The ground heaved violently, fury unchecked, and I felt something brush against my ankle, a cold, bony hand. Screaming, I tore myself free, flinging backward into the mass of the hooded figures. I was enveloped in their icy presence, a wall of despair that quaked the very ground I stood on. "Join us, become part of this eternal night," they hissed, their words corrosive and inviting. That I, in a moment of clarity, fueled by panic, I lunged to the right, bolting toward the entrance to the oil field, the only barrier between me and whatever lay behind me. As I tore through the fading light, flashes of movement swirled in the corner of my eye, more figures emerging from the shadows, their grotesque forms writhing toward me, but a sudden brilliant light broke through, illuminating the path ahead. That I darted through the acrid mist, feeling fingers graze my arms, desperately seeking my warmth, their whispered promises inching closer. Just before I reached the door, I glanced back one last time. The horde stood still, watching, calm in their ghastly anticipation. Their leader, one figure slightly taller than the others, revealed a face obscured in shadows yet unmistakably familiar. I stumbled backward, a crushing disbelief ripping me from my resolve. That it was him. "My father, stay with us," he beckoned, and the darkness closed in around me, a suffocating embrace, pulling me further into the void. I fought against it, my breath hitching, a desperate gasp fracturing the silence. At that moment, the door behind me slammed shut with an echoing boom, sealing my fate, and just like that, I was surrounded, consumed by his call. The last thing I heard was his voice, an echo of love twisted with malice, "Welcome home." And then, darkness. I awoke gasping, the air around me thick and stale, like remnants of a long-forgotten secret clinging to the walls. I was no longer in the chasm but sprawled out on the cold, unforgiving concrete of some derelict warehouse. Flickering lights cast dancing shadows that seemed to possess a life of their own, each flicker taunting my memories of that towering figure. My heart raced as I remembered my father's voice, a siren's call resonating with familiarity yet drenched in dread. Pushing myself up, I glanced around the warehouse. Crumbling machinery lay strewn about, remnants of a cruel past where men toiled under a relentless sun, sculpting the earth into something unnatural. The faint smell of oil permeated the air, mingling with an underlying aroma of rust. But there was something else, something distinctly wrong. It crackled at the edge of my senses like static before a storm. A sudden crash echoed from the shadows, freezing me in place. My heart lurched as a figure darted into the feeble light, a glimpse of pale skin against the backdrop of the dark. Then nothing, just an abrupt silence that felt alive, crawling beneath my skin and setting my nerves alight. "Hello?" I called out, my voice a shuddering whisper, scrabbling against the oppressive void. In that moment, I felt their gaze heavy, expectant. Something was in here with me. I could almost feel their breath against my neck, the brush of fingers tracing the outline of my spine. Summoning what little courage remained, I took an unsteady step forward, drawn inexplicably deeper into the warehouse's bowels. Flickering lights above struggled against the dark, illuminating grotesque faces painted on the walls, a chilling gallery of despair. Each visage seemed to silently scream, their mouths twisted in eternal agony, and my pulse quickened. I stumbled back, hitting something sturdy, a metal filing cabinet caked with dust and disuse. A sudden clang reverberated behind me, and I whirled around to see a heavy door swinging slightly ajar in the far corner. An unnatural force pulled me toward it, slackening the chains of terror that gripped my heart. Part of me screamed to run, to bar the door and escape whatever lay beyond, but an insatiable curiosity urged me forward. "Please just leave," a voice seeped from within the room, croaking, desperate and yet eerily familiar. My pulse thundered in my ears as I edged closer, heart racing against primal instinct. "Do you want to see him? Do you seek the truth?" My breath hitched. "Father?" I whispered, barely able to contain the quivering sense of hope igniting within me. The door creaked open, and I stumbled into the dim light of the adjoining room. The insides were cluttered, a bizarre mix of personal effects, faded photographs and newspaper clippings splattered with blackened stains. Each artifact held a story, a horror etched into its very fabric. And there hovering within the shards of light a tattered oil-slicked photo of my father, but his eyes were hollow, absent of the warmth I had once known. Behind it, shadowy figures twisted in an eerie dance, their motions rhythmic yet disjointed, like marionettes pulled by invisible strings. They whispered my name, their tone a chorus of longing and malice, permeating the air with an intensity that left me gasping. Panic seized me, and I turned to flee but froze mid-step as a frigid wind swept through, slamming the door behind me. The voices escalated to a deafening crescendo. "You shouldn't have come here. You should have listened." Overcome by the cacophony, I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by the merging of forgotten memories, my father's laughter ringing hollow in my ears, melded with the agony of the shadows spiraling around me. I shut my eyes tight, trying to block it all out, and in that moment, a chilling understanding washed over me. Every moment I had spent searching for my father, I had disturbed something better left alone. Suddenly, an insidious calm settled on the room. The shadows stopped dancing, solidifying into grotesque forms that closed in around me. Their elongated shadows consumed the last dim rays of light, merging into something intimate yet horrific, a murky composite of sorrow etched by generations lost. Through the suffocating darkness, one figure stepped from the moss, a familiar silhouette cloaked in shadows. "Welcome back, my dear," my father beckoned, his voice mellifluous yet dripping with foreboding. "You weren't meant to leave." My breath caught in my throat, and time slowed. Understanding spilled over me, mingled with terror. In my soul, I knew I wasn't the one searching for him. He was the one seeking me, and as the darkness surged forward, I realized with bone-chilling clarity, I would either join them or become one of them. With a haunting smile, he reached out, and as the shadows engulfed me, the last remnants of my will vanished beneath an unending abyss. Then came the silencing scream, and darkness swallowed everything whole. The first surge of cold air brought me back, jolting me upright against the unforgiving concrete. My skin prickled as I opened my eyes, but the familiar walls of the warehouse were gone. Instead, I found myself in an expansive, silver-lit room, the steel surfaces reflecting a ghostly hue. It looked like an abandoned oil rig control center, now forever dormant, caked in heavy dust. My pulse hammered in my ears, reverberating off the stark surfaces as I scanned the expanse. Monitors lay dark and lifeless across the walls, their screens adorned with strange symbols that flickered like haunting memories on the periphery of my cognition. The scent of petroleum, sharp and pungent, swirled around me, coating my throat as I pushed myself to my feet, awareness slowly clawing its way back into my mind. Where was my father? The thought sent a tremor through my chest. Had I really come here seeking answers, or was I being drawn deeper into something sinister? A shiver ran down my spine as I ventured further, my bare feet gliding over the grimy floor, each step reverberating into the hollow expanse. Then I heard it. A whisper. Soft yet cutting, like ice scraping the surface of boiling water. The sound wrapped around me, thrumming with urgency. "Help us find him," it echoed through the metallic shell, sending splinters of fear racing along my veins. I turned, searching for its source, dread settling into my bones like winter's chill. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into a strobe of shadow and illumination. Shapes darted in and out of the darkness, twisted figures wreathed in oil and dust, their mournful expressions painfully familiar. They leaned toward me, mouths opening wide in silent screams, their features grotesque but eerily aligned with my own memories. The twisted legacy of my family flashed before my eyes, generations of pain seeped in oil, buried deep beneath the ground. "Don't you see?" A voice erupted in the chaos, sharp, cutting through the dimness, a voice I recognized as my own. The realization roared through me. This is where it all happens. You must remember. Confusion threatened to pull me under as the shadowy figures encroached upon me, their limbs like the jagged limbs of skeletal trees, reaching out with desperate hunger. I staggered back, nearly tripping over twisted pipes that snaked across the ground like lifeless serpents. The vision of my father flickered again, fading into the chaos, replaced only by the dark abyss of despair. There was something I needed to discover, and within the shadows, I felt the weight of unshed secrets gathering. The ground shifted beneath me, rumbles like low growls echoing from beneath the floor. Panic surged again as I stumbled in a dash toward the door, hands hyperventilating against the cold metal, but the knob was immovable, as if the walls pressed together in their silencing embrace. A heavy fog bloomed at the edges of my vision, thickening around the grotesque figures now standing eerily still watching, waiting, join us they murmured, voices an amalgamation of regret and sorrow, reverberating like the machines that had once imbued this place with life. I felt my chest constrict as they took a step toward me. You belong here. Your father needs you. With every step they took, I felt the earth shift again, and a low thunder surged beneath my feet, roaring to life like a hungry beast. The lights above dimmed, drowning us in an oppressive blackness that enveloped everything save for the staccato flashes of shadow that licked at my heels. Stop. You can't have me. I cried, desperation firing up my veins, my hands clawing against the cold steel like a drowning creature grasping for oxygen. The whispers melded into a chant, chanting my name until it became a cacophony of grief. You must return as if summoned. Jagged cracks spread from the center of the floor, spilling out yellow-green light like an oil slick on water. I gasped, my vision blurring as the airs thickened, filling with choking despair, and the specters rushed closer, eclipsing the last vestiges of light. In that moment, I felt an electrifying pull, wrapped tightly within a web of desperation. The once familiar faces of my family twisted grotesquely into figures I scarcely recognized anymore. You must find him to end the cycle. Or join us forever, become a part of the darkness. Underneath the howl of phantom winds, I realized I was falling, plummeting down through the oil-black chasm that opened beneath me. The shadows reached out, clawing at my ankles, and I struggled against their grasp, as the eerie chants of my name echoed around me, shrinking down into nothingness that I would find themer these shadows would drag me into the endless depths. I felt their last chilling breath brushing against my skin as I vanished into the unknown, leaving behind a mere whisper of my existence. And then there was silence, punctuated only by the chilling howl of the void, a promise of the horrors yet to come. I plunged into the abyss, the sensation of falling merging seamlessly with the frigid darkness that enveloped me. My body twisted and turned, weightless yet anchored by the knowing grasp of the shadows that clawed eagerly at my limbs. I braced myself for impact even as the world around me dissolved, the howling ether of despair swirling into a cacophony of whispers that threatened to consume my senses. Before I could comprehend the absence of light, I found myself sprawled painfully on the uneven ground, gasping for breath in the stale air thick with decay and a smoldering tang of something metallic. The moment was brief, suspended in time, my heart hammering against my ribs as I blinked through the dimness. I was in a corridor, its walls slick with grime and streaked with undefined stains that seemed to breathe with their own malevolent life. As I gathered my thoughts, the echo of my name hung in the air, drifting toward me like a drifting wisp of smoke. The very walls seemed to pulse, throbbing as if alive, whispering secrets that made my skin crawl. The distance between me and salvation felt infinite. I couldn't linger here, I had to move. With shaky legs, I navigated the narrow hallway, the space constricting as though the building were tightening its grip on me. Shadows writhed at the edges of my vision, teasing the fringes of my sanity. I stumbled to a door ominously labeled, restricted access, the paint peeling away as if it had long yearned to reveal the horrors hidden within. My instinct screamed for me to turn back, but the voices intensified, weaving together into an overwhelming siren song of despair. Open it, find him. As if tethered by an unseen force, my hand turned the handle, the metallic clank echoing like a gunshot reverberating against the oppressive silence. The door creaked open in a cloud of stale air and burnt rubber, revealing a vast chamber bathed in an otherworldly silver glow. Machinery lay dormant, rusted and twisted. Giant cranes loomed like skeletal sentinels above an immense pit, blacker than the void through which I had just descended. The ground was riddled with sharp metal shards, remnants of a forgotten civilization-y family's legacy. At the center of the room, the pit pulsated, undulating like a breathing creature. I could hear it now, the low, ominous growl rising from the depths, vibrating through the cold floor beneath my feet. The air thickened with the scent of rotting vegetation, a sickly, sweet reminder of the land that had once thrived here before it had been consumed by greed. Flashes of my father's recordings, a man dedicated to a cursed lineage, flashed through my mind like erratic films, each moment slathered with dread. Stay away. You must leave. I urged myself, yelling into the void, as the shadows flickered around me with an insatiable hunger. But the pull toward the pit was terrifyingly strong, drawing me closer as ethereal figures started to weave in and out of my vision, begging silently for release. Their scars mirrored mine, a lineage born from the weight of ancestral sins that clung to each of us like a heavy cloak. That I, in the depths of the darkness, I heard a voice that was not my own, yet felt intimately familiar. Find me, it beckoned, weaving through the air like smoke lingering in the aftermath of fire. It was a plea, a cry for existence. My heart twisted painfully, fueled by an urgency that compelled me forward, past the looming shadows, as they stretched their grotesque limbs toward the chasm. Just as my toe brushed the edge of the pit, a deafening roar erupted from it, a swirl of blinding light and unearthly wails cascading over me. I stumbled back, the horror and anguish emanating from below swallowed the room in crushing despair. The figures surrounding me lunged, their silent screams ripping through the silence as the air thickened with the taste of oil and regret. Join us. They screamed in unison, their visages contorting into a reflection of my own terror. I was frozen, and the light flared higher, illuminating the faces of my ancestors, their eyes weary and filled with longing. I felt their sorrow wrap around my heart, their pain mingling with my own. Then, the pit spoke again, the voice now rising within a pitch of agony. Help me end it. The realization swooped through me, magnified in this cavernous space, the burden of existence pressing down like a vice. This was not just a plea, it was an ultimatum, a chance to break the cyclido, rescue my father, or be forever entwined with the tragic fates of those long past. With my heart racing, I stepped closer to the edge. The whispers morphed into a hypnotic hymn, echoing my name, wrapping around me like a comforting shroud. I could feel the shadows pulling, cold and unyielding, beckoning me toward the maw of the abyss. And just when I thought I was ready to leap, the ground trembled violently beneath my feet, the darkness below erupting with shadows that reached out, grasping at my ankles. Help us. You can't leave. In that instant, everything shifted. The figures surged forward, fingers like ice wrapping around my legs, and I screamed, the cacophony reverberating against hallowed steel. The entire chamber roared as if awakening from a long slumber, fire igniting beneath the pit, illuminating something far more grotesque than I could comprehend. I glanced back one last time toward the door, the familiar silhouette of my father flickering into view, a hand reaching toward me. Come back. The ache within me deepened, torn between the haunting horror threatening to consume me and the desperate hope of rescue. I teetered at the crossroads of fate, and just as the shadows prepared to drag me into the depths, the world erupted in a blinding flash of light. And then I felt nothing. When consciousness seeped back into me, I was no longer paralyzed by fear. Instead, a frigid grip encased my body, holding me in a web woven from the remnants of nightmares. I lay on the cold, hard surface, the air heavy with the smell of sulfur and despair. As I groaned and pushed myself up, a noise echoed in the distance, mechanical yet oddly rhythmic like a heartbeat. The pit still loomed behind me, shrouded in inky darkness, but now, the oppressive weight of despair seemed to have lifted slightly. I felt disoriented, the remnants of the shadows fading, but the taste of dread lingered at the back of my throat. Rising to my feet, I noticed a dim, flickering light coming from a corridor to my left, illuminating the path like the tongue of a dying flame. A part of me wanted to retreat to the familiarity of the pit's edge, drawn back to its sickly whispers, but the growing thrum of machinery called for exploration. As I stepped forward, chancing a glance at the pit behind me, I sensed that the wailing had quieted, replaced with an eerie stillness that wrapped around me like a shroud. That I stumbled down the corridor, the floor felt sticky beneath my shoes, and in the dim light, I could make out lines, thin, red veins that twisted along the base of the wall like roots from a cursed tree. The walls pulsed gently, as if the very building was alive, feeding off the remnants of its past. Each thump of my heart synced with the machinery's rhythmic beat, pounding in my ears. As I turned a corner, the flickering light exploded into blinding brightness, and I shielded my eyes with a grimy hand. The expansive room was filled with what looked like rows of devices, twisted amalgamations of gears interspersed with glass tubes bubbling with dark liquid. What terror they had witnessed over the years felt palpable in this space, in the cries that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the room. Nearby, I discovered a control panel littered with dust and obscured in grime. An array of buttons flickered to life beneath my touch, casting ominous shadows on the walls. I shivered as I felt the whispering concerns of unseen entities tug against my instincts, urging me to leave, but the curiosity to unravel this enigma pushed me further. "Who are you?" I murmured, pressing a button marked activation. The machinery shuddered violently, and a cacophony erupted, drowning out my voice. The glass tubes filled to the brim, and shadows flared around me like furious spirits awakened from a long slumber. I recoiled in terror as the room began to shift. Metal screeched against metal, the vibrations cutting through me like a knife, and then, I saw him. My father stood at the edge of the room, his figure ghostly pale and translucent, as if the weight of his despair tethered him between realms. His eyes met mine in a haunting gaze, filled with an emotion deeper than mere recognition, something akin to guilt and sorrow mingling together. It echoed through my bones. "Stop!" he cried, his voice drenched with urgency. "You mustn't awaken them," but it was too late. A low growl resonated from the machinery, rising in pitch like a storm. Figure shadows flitted around the edges of the room, their once silent forms now screeching with a discordant rage. Their faces emerged from the darkness, hiding profound anguish and torment, and they were drawn towards me, hungry and calling for release. The machinery belched out a plume of thick steam, obscuring my vision, but through the fog, I felt my father's presence growing weaker. "I'm sorry," I yelled, desperation clawing at my throat. I didn't mean to. Suddenly, the control panel exploded into a shower of sparks, and reality warped in an instant. The air thickened, and I felt a suffocating presence. I was not alone. The shadows congealed towards me, coiling like snakes, and then, within their folds, I saw a monstrous silhouette emerging from the machinery. It was grotesque and unfathomable, a thing birthed from the depths of terror, its eyes glowing like fiery coals, pulling me towards the essence of its nightmare. That I realized then, with a gnawing chill, that I had not just awakened the remnants of the past but summoned something far worse than I could have imagined. Before I could react, the ground beneath me bucked violently, sending me sprawling. I caught my breath and scrambled to my feet, but the shadows were closing in, whispering my name with a cacophony of despair. "Help us break the chains." The echo of my father's face faded into the shadows, replaced by those of anguished souls reaching for salvation. As I was dragged back toward the spreading darkness, I could hear my father's voice still despairingly calling out, "You're running out of time." Just then, a blinding light engulfed the room, consuming everything, and in that moment, with the walls closing in and the shadows congealing around me, I felt the terrible truth: I was no longer in control. And then everything fell silent, except for a single question hanging in the air like a noose around my neck. What had I awakened? The silence was thunderous, pressing against my ears like a thick fog. The bright light gradually dimmed, swirling around me like a dance of stars evaporating into the night. I stood alone in the eerie calm that followed the chaos, my breath shallow, each exhalation punctuated by a sense of impending doom. Panic surged within me, driving my heart to pound against my ribcage like a creature desperate to escape its confinement. Shadows shifted in the corners of the room, twisting and stretching with a life of their own, their hunger palpable. I could see the outlines of faces, twisted in agony, their mouths moving but no sound escaping, just a deathly stillness that sent a visceral chill crawling up my spine. "Help us!" a whisper floated through the air, wrapping around me like cold fingers, squeezing until I nearly gasped. It was a voice imbued with raw longing, desperate and broken. I turned toward the sound, but there was only swirling darkness, the contours of what once was shifting behind a curtain of despair. That I staggered back toward the control panel, the hollowed shell of machinery still throbbing softly, a heartbeat of synthetic warmth amidst the chill of the supernatural. In my desperation, I pressed my palms against the cool surface, searching for clarity. "What do you want?" I asked aloud, knowing full well the futility of my question. The shadows converged closer, a wave of darkness that ebbed and flowed as if it had a consciousness, a collective force of untold sorrow and raggy a chaotic storm. Break the chains, they murmured again, a haunting chorus that filled the space with so much anguish, it felt like a stab to my sanity. It struck me then, the chains weren't merely physical. They were the remnants of memory, shackles forged from the despair of lost souls longing for vengeance, for peace that had eluded them for too long. My fingers trembled as I searched for answers within the buttons, illuminating words I could barely comprehend. Then I noticed an engraving that sent ripples of fear through me, "Release Protocol." I felt a fatal pull, an urge to press it, to unchain them, to free them from their torment. Perhaps then they would leave me in peace. Just as my fingers hovered over the engraved button, the atmosphere shifted violently. The room quaked, and the walls pulsated with a wild, warped life. An anguished wail erupted from the shadows, clawing its way into my consciousness, drowning out the last flickering remnants of rationality. I felt it then, a jolt deep inside me, a connection forged not merely from dread but from the undeniable history that tied us together. A figure emerged from within the tumult, a woman, her form shimmering like heat haze, her features sharpened by the pain etched into her face. Her eyes, pools of sorrow, found mine, and I felt an overwhelming compulsion to help. "You must understand," she screamed, "they are tied to this place. This oil field that lives it has consumed." Her voice cracked, and hesitation invaded her fury. "It must not continue." I swallowed hard, words caught in my throat. "But how?" My mind raced, the consequence of awakening them rippling through my thoughts. "What can I do?" "Push the button. Release us," she begged, then recoiled as a low growl echoed from the shadows, the monstrous silhouette swirling with anger, its hunger palpable. In the chaos, the memories of my father flickered, entwining with the anguish of these souls. His warnings, layered beneath layers of pain, converged like a confluence of rivers. The architecture of regret creaked against the walls of my mind, but even as I teetered on the precipice of action, the shadows coiled tighter around my ankles, yanking me back, snarling with a fury that seemed to transcend words. "You'll be punished," they hissed. "You cannot free them. You will suffer eternally." My choice was upon me. As the din swirled and echoed, a cacophony of lost souls shrieking for release, I felt time slow, each second stretching, thick with dread. I held my breath, my heart racing, gripped by the overwhelming urge to either unleash the cataclysmic rage or run back into the depths of those darkened corridors seeking solace amidst despair. But all I managed was to breathe out a single word, trembling upon my lips, not knowing what reality would be birthed from my choice. Ready. A sudden silence reigned, the sorrowful wails fell quiet. I could feel the energy crackle in the air, tension coiling tighter than a spring, poised to burst. And then, without warning, the ground beneath me shifted violently again, only this time it tore open beneath my feet, revealing an abyss that called to me, an all-consuming maw drawn forth from the darkest depths of the earth. As I plummeted into the chasm below, I felt the entangling fingers of shadows pulling me into their embrace more potent, more terrifying than any I had ever known. I screamed, the sound swallowed by the void, and in those last terrifying moments of descent, an even darker truth began to unfold, something far more sinister, lurking in the folds of the chasm, waiting to devour not just me but everything I thought I understood. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me whole was the flickering light of the control panel above, and the word I had intended to press: release, everything to stitch together the terrors of a new reality. The fall felt eternal, a dizzying spiral into depths that mirrored my confusion. I twisted through darkness, and with each fleeting moment, echoes of the past swirled violently around me, phantom cries of despair left in the wake of a merciless oil rig, memories infused with the rancid odor of regret and the stench of lost lives. With an abrupt thud, I collided with a surface slick and malodorous, kneeling in an oil-slicked pit that swallowed the feeble glow of the control panel above. Stars of cold white dust danced away from me, and horror gripped my chest as the realization hit: this was not a void but a chamber, a hidden haunt at the very core of the desolate field. I struggled to stand, my body encased in sticky remnants of past lives. Mud clung to my skin, shadows skittered along the edges of my vision, otherworldly creatures lurking just beyond the filmy gloom. The air turned icy, charged with the anguish of souls, restless and yearning for a release I could scarcely fathom. Desperation surged, twisting like a knife in my gut. I glimpsed faint shapes, writhing masses, woven into the darkness. Figures that flickered in and out of existence, spinning around me like forbidden memories. In hushed tones, they whispered my name, the syllables curling around me, binding me to their torment. Help us, they pleaded, their voices harmonizing into a chilling symphony that resonated deep within my bones. They were lost, shattered remnants of those who had dared to tap the earth and only found horrors in return. As I stumbled forward, the chamber expanded, contorting what had once been solid earth warped into grotesque formations. The sound of pounding hearts echoed from the darkness, a collective rhythm of fear vibrating with a sickly pulse. This was their heartbeat, they were alive in a way, even if it was in a realm of suffering. That I spotted a glimmer of light, a cauldron of flickering flame that emitted black smoke, twisting spirals of darkness that threatened to collapse back into the void. It beckoned me, a lure for the frightened and the curious. I edged closer, captivated, just as a deafening roar erupted from the shadows, sending vibrations through my body that flayed my sanity. Do not touch it. A voice thundered, stronger than the rest, stern and broken. Out from the depths emerged a man, a visage both familiar and neglected, his eyes dark pools of suffering, reflecting a void from which no hope could emerge. It was my father. Why are you here? I gasped, disbelief submerged in the terror surrounding me. This cannot be real, it is as real as the sins that brought you here. He screamed, the anguish in his tone wrapping around my throat like a noose. You must leave. They thrive on the living's despair. This place is cursed. The oilet drinks the souls of the innocent. I shook my head, struggling against the tide of his words. But 2M supposed to help them. They do not need help. They need your essence, your fear. You are a vessel, a source. Do you not understand? His voice cracked, nearly drowning in the cacophony of lost souls. They will drag you down, keep you here. You can't let them take you. In that moment, the chamber convulsed, shadows shattering into a storm. The malevolence converged, slithering toward me as the cries turned frenzied, fingers relentlessly outstretched, aiming to siphon my very life force, the essence of my being. No. I screamed, fighting against the instinct to flee, to cower. But in truth, there was nowhere left to run. I recalled the engraved button on the control panel, the release protocol. Wrapped in dread, the shadows enveloped me until all that remained was the gravity of despair. I could feel the temperature drop, frost creeping along my skin, as silhouettes of lost souls transformed into grotesque monsters, their faces twisted in insanity, barred teeth glistening with unnatural hunger. They were no longer the mournful phantoms I had seen before, they were nightmares given life, revealing a truth too horrifying to bear. Join us. They chanted, every syllable a dank cauldron boiling with rage. Give in to despair, and then, from the depths of the abyss, the flame flickered, brighter yet hotter, bursting with life and fury, a momentary star against the encroaching darkness. I felt a tremor beneath my feet and instinctively looked to my father, desperate for guidance, but he was gone. The only trace left was the ball of luminescence growing fiercely, drawing me in, promising power amidst the chaos. But the shadows twisted, coiling tighter around my throat, right before it all collapsed into a deafening silence. My heart raced, confusion flaring. The voices faded, leaving behind an eerie stillness that blanketed everything, plunging me deeper into uncertainty. My thoughts spiraled, and in that tragic moment, one chilling reality cemented in my mind. Whatever I chose next would seal my fate, a thread pulled so taut it could snap at any moment. And then, as the shadows writhed hungrily around me, the light surged forward, a beam more blinding than hope, and I understood, I had to choose between embracing the eternal darkness or confronting the light's wrath. As my trembling fingers extended towards the brightness, a thunderous hiss erupted from below, merging with the collective wails of countless souls, vibrating through the chamber, as if they held their breath, waiting for my final decision. Would I become a part of the horror, or would I unleash something unspeakable? The light winked at Meth, only warning I would receive before the final choice, and amid the turmoil, I heard a voice one last time back from the shadows, you've awakened something far worse, something that cannot be contained. As my fingers drew closer, the ground beneath me trembled, and without hesitation, I pressed on, triggering a chain of events that would resonate throughout this cursed land, plunging us all into a chaos more horrific than I could ever have imagined. Panic surged through me as the world jostled violently, shadows clawing at my existence while I hovered at the precipice of choice. The incandescent light pulsed before me, alive and raw with potential, yet the despair of countless souls lurked hungrily in the darkness, eager to claim me. Each whisper, each desperate plea spilled forth from the void, a symphony of anguish calling me home, promising solace but only doom. You've awakened something far worse, the voice echoed, a chilling reminder of my past mistakes, my inability to heed the warnings that had culminated in this moment. I darted my eyes back to the flickering flame that beckoned me closer, and in that instant, clarity cut through the murky fog of fear and desperation. This was a turning point, this was where I would embrace enlightenment or succumb to the haunting shadows. With a breath that felt lungs deep and heavy with dread, I took a step closer to the light. Each moment felt infinite, as if the air itself held its breath in anticipation of my decision. Shadows twisted and contorted, reacquainting me with the faces of lost ancestors, remnants of forgotten lives intertwining with my own. You will join us. They screamed, their voices mirroring the tumult within the depths of my being, layering doubt over determination, just as fingers of darkness reached my wrists, wrapping firmly around my sanity. The light surged in a desperate plea, illuminating secrets hidden for decades, spilling forth truths that suffocated the room in ghostly brightness. It flickered through my bones, igniting hope, a furious drive to break the cycle of despair, to release the tormented souls yearning for peace. No. I cried, grasping for the luminescence, feeling the cold tendrils of shadows gripping tighter around me. I won't let you take me. I won't succumb. With a sudden resolve, I pressed my hand against the flickering flame, the heat radiating like raw energy, and the room exploded into blinding brilliance. Pain surged through me as the darkness recoiled from the incandescent light, a manifestation that shattered their malevolence in an almost cathartic display. The shadows shrieked, disintegrating into wisps of smoke, their anguished cries reverberating through the very fabric of the air, but then, in the chaos, I heard a voice stronger than the rest. It wasn't a disembodied echo or the distant wail of despair. It was my father. Release them now. He bellowed, his form materializing in the brilliance alongside me, pulling from my heartbeat as he had done 1,000 times before. They're bound to this cycle through your lineage. Only through you can they find peace. I hesitated for a heartbeat, the weight of his words striking me deeply. Control had eluded me from the moment I opened the door, and yet here stood the key. I felt the flickering tension of unresolved memories pulse through the space around memories begging to be freed from the chains of this cursed land, with my father's face before me, contorted by suffering but flickering with something akin to hope. I grasped the thoughts erupting within. I understand now, I whispered, feeling the weight of generations upon my shoulders. The shadows thrashed, grinding against the luminescence I now commanded, screeching with fury. You cannot. They howled, but my heart thundered steady, drowning the cacophony through sheer force of will. As I pressed deeper into the warmth of the light, I felt threads of memories weave around me, connecting to the fragments of despair yearning for liberation. Each pulse resonated within my bones, each tear spilled from long-buried anguish fueled my purpose. You will not take what is mine. I roared, bitter and determined, while the secrets of the past rose within me, igniting my resolve. Let me set you free. I cried against the whirlwind of chaos as I pulled my heartbeat into the ether, transforming despair into a guiding light. The shadows shrunk back as spectral figures emerged from the darkness, desperate souls entwined with my bloodline. Ethereal forms flickered, revealing the stories that had long been hidden beneath layers of sorrow. With one last surge of strength, I unleashed the energy binding each of us. In one radiant wave, I could sense the essence of their long-lost joys seeping forth. The void erupted with blinding brilliance, drowning shrieks of anguish in a torrent of liberation. In that instant, their forms melded with the light, spirits born anew upon the air, spilling forth like petals in spring. The darkness ripped away, unveiling forgotten joys through incandescent beams, but even amidst the chaos, I felt it, that lurking perception whispering in the dark corners of my reality. The darkness didn't vanish, rather it writhed, gathering what remained of the cries, growing thicker, more insatiable. Somewhere in that swirl lay a deeper menace, seeping into the crevices of my consciousness. As the last remnants of the souls fluttered into the ether, the air thickened with the retribution of shadows scorned, and I recognized the grim truth: the deeper evil lay beneath the surface, waiting for the chance to devour what light I had wrought free. Not all will find peace, my father warned, his figure flickering and destabilizing in the brilliance. The darkest shadows awakened to take back what was lost. Just then, the ground trembled, and the very fabric of the world around me seemed to break apart, shadows coiling like waking serpents. There was no triumph in this victory. The curse was merely transforming, evolving into something unfathomably darker. And amidst that realization, the chains of my heritage echoed with their ancient chant. You will join us. The voices melded into the abyss, composing a haunting dirge that echoed grimly, sharpening the realization that the darkness was not fully gone but rather shifted, lurking, waiting patiently. A horror beyond comprehension loomed as I stared into that abyss, and I knew that I had freed them, but I would never escape. The last threads of light flickered, and all that was left were the shadows, ready to reclaim what belonged to them, ready to drag me back. Beneath the hollow gaze of the past, a chilling truth slithered into my mind: darkness was eternal, and its appetite for revenge unquenchable. And through my decisive act of love, I had merely sown the seeds of a horror yet to unfold. Welcome home, the dark abyss whispered, a promise wrapped in the shroud of despair, and in that echoing moment, I understood something unspeakably horrifying. My father had not been the savior I longed for, he had been the harbinger, and I was eternally bound to the shadows that had awakened. This was only the beginning of a nightmare I could never escape.